Yo, welcome to the Table Talk podcast, where we sit down, pull up a chair, and we get started. This podcast is designed to provide you packed full of information to help you with your training, nutrition, lifestyle, and well-being, where we interview myself through case studies to give you lifetime experience. And then we also interview high-performing individuals or other career-focused people who are looking to make changes in their lifestyle, training, nutrition, and well-being. So let's pull up that chair and let's go. Yo, welcome to Elite Table Talk. Yes, we have leveled up the podcast and we are kicking off with Kathy O. Now, this podcast episode is a little bit interesting. There's a little bit of controversy around this topic, and that is around the navigation of the menstrual cycle to optimize health and athletic performance. Now, for those that have maybe been around seeing Kathy posting and I posting about this, you would say, Carl, she's written a lot of notes. I would say she's written a small novel of things to discuss on this topic from her experience, and on obviously there on the pill, 2, when coming off, and then 3, kind of if you look behind, you'll see a plethora of books. So her own self-discovery and research and understanding. So this is why I say a small novel. So we're going to go through a podcast today with Kathy O, where I may be able to ask some questions, may being the word, because we've got a strict guideline to follow that was provided by her, not by me. So you're going to enjoy today's episode as much as I'm going to. So I'm the coach that works with Kathy O for the last 3 years. And now I think the tables have turned. So, I'm going to blink twice because I think I need some help. So let's dive into this episode. Let's have some fun. And let's actually look at the menstruation cycle. Disclaimer, you're a female on a medication or the pill or having challenges. Kathy O is a medical professional that you can talk to, or talk to your local GP or doctor. These are for educational purposes and for you to kind of, ponder. All right. Yo, Kathy O.
Hey, Carl. Thanks for having me. That was all beautifully said. Definitely coming into this topic with a lot of curiosity. And that's one of the things that I will be highlighting that we have learned over the last year. Tracking builds awareness. We always keep coming back to that. Tracking builds awareness and lets us get to know ourselves better. And that's how we came to this topic, really, was through watching me go through my personal struggles. So really what happened was I was on Implanon, which is a little rod that's put into the arm. It is birth control that releases a steady release of progesterone, the hormone progesterone, which actually tricks the body into thinking that it's pregnant and no ovulation occurs. So I had this for 7 years. And first time I got it, I thought, great. I responded really well to it, according to what the GP said. Mind you, I was 21 years old when I did this, had very little to no knowledge, tried doing some of my own research, couldn't really understand it much, asked some questions, didn't really get much response, right? All I knew was that one of the possible side effects is spotting throughout, and that kind of means you're not really responding to it well. So as soon as I put Implanon in, no period whatsoever. Happy days for me. And I was really excited. I don't have to deal with my period every month anymore. So there's this steady release of progesterone, which means it's suppressing ovulation. And I'll get into what's actually happening with the hormones throughout the cycle so that we understand what this is doing. But later, after 7 years of having it and going through my personal experience of leading up to my explant surgery, I kind of started questioning, what was this doing to my body? 7 years, almost 8, I haven't had a healthy period. I had spotting throughout sometimes, which related back to stress and the codependent relationship that I was in. So there was a lot of emotional stuff going on as well that was impacting my nervous system. And I started questioning, like, I have this thing that's actually controlling my hormones. So I didn't really understand what was going on with my hormones. And I decided to take it out. When I took it out, that's shortly after when I went into taking out the breast implants that I had. And I think that we didn't really see the effects of the hormonal imbalances until I returned back to training after the explant. It was about 6 to 12 weeks after that we started to notice, specifically I started to notice returning to the gym all throughout 2023. I really struggled with consistency, and it really got to me. I remember reflecting in December and looking back at the inconsistent workouts that were happening. And what I noticed was there was consistency in the inconsistency. We started to notice the trends. We started we started to notice how it married up with my cycle, what was happening in the different phases and my mood swings. And we started tracking caffeine intake and all these other things. So again, tracking builds awareness. We started to notice these patterns, and that basically when Kathy was moody, she would do whatever she wanted and she would skip days. Remember? She would skip days. She would lower the weight. She really had a mind of her own. And Coach was really, really supportive throughout all of this.
Been doing this for 3 years. What are you talking about? Hang on. Well, before we go into this, can we just let's really wind a little bit. First, menstruation. What?
Yeah.
Can we probably, like, for a few people, because as much as I would love to say, yep, I know what menstruation is, you know what menstruation is, but actually a lot of people don't, because it's really like something's going to happen every month. Use a tampon, put this thing in, implant on, and you'll be good. So I guess to come back to how this all started, what was going on at 21? Then you got the implant on. Like, what made it the right idea at the time?
Yeah. So initially I went in with, it's birth control. I don't want to get pregnant. Right. And then the doctor gives you a few options. You can get on the pill, you can get this implant on, you've got the copper, IUD, and they kind of tell you the risks and when they would use what. And then the implant on just seemed like the easy option because you don't have to remember it to take it. And it's there, and it's a steady release of the hormone. But again, they don't really explain, which is what I looked into before taking it out. One of the huge side effects is that actually any type of birth control increases your risk of depression and anxiety by 50%. Now, looking back now with the knowledge that I have, it makes sense because you are suppressing or adding hormones into your body, which are chemicals interacting with other chemicals into your body. And we know the gut-brain axis is direct, bidirectional. Most of the signals go from the gut to the brain. So you are ingesting these hormones, these pills, or these hormones are being released into your bloodstream and traveling up to your brain. And there's a lot of mixed signals going on here. And basically, these hormones are telling the body what's going on. So we are no longer really listening to the body itself. We're not letting it do its innate ability, what it's supposed to be doing. We're suppressing. And a lot of this, again, comes from, and there's a lot of, it's controversial because whose responsibility is it? And again, bigger picture goals. So for me, it was, I was a young age. I didn't want to get pregnant. I got the implant on. My period was gone. Even though I wasn't very sexually active, for me, it was, I don't have my period. I was really happy not to deal with that each month. And this comes back to my personal belief system again of, you start questioning now, coming out of it, like, where did that come from? Why was I suppressing my bleeds? Why was I so comfortable not bleeding when this is actually a very feminine thing? And then we can go into societal norms nowadays where there is a lot of suppression and there is a lot of mixed signals, and women are being encouraged to live on a 24-hour kind of a clock, like the male clock, whereas we have a 28-day cycle, which, again, the ebbs and the flows of those hormones.
So now we're coming to society. No. It's 20, there's 24 hours in a day. We will continue the cycle. Men don't have periods. Debatable.
It's
We have a 24-hour cycle.
exactly. You guys are much easier. Your cortisol spikes in the morning, and it's 24 hours. By the end of your day, you're tired and you can do it all again the next day. And this is what I experienced, and this is what I loved about myself when I was on Implanon. I was so consistent because I lived on that 24-hour cycle and I could just keep going, go, go, go. There was no stop. There was no moodiness. There was no ovulation. There was no dip in hormones. So when suddenly this was happening, I was so confused to the point that I remember in December having a conversation with my mom and being like, I don't know who I am. I'm so inconsistent, and there's consistency in the inconsistency, and I'm so confused. Who am I when I'm not on birth control? And really, again, coming back to those questions, I didn't know myself back when I was 21, right? I didn't even know myself back before. I'd forgotten who I was. I started masking it. So suddenly I was getting to know my true self again without the interaction of these suppressing ovulation and stuff, which a lot of emotion comes out with that. But I really want to get into what happens during the menstrual cycle with our hormones.
But to talk to the side of, with the Implanon, I'd say the beauty of it is that because when it comes to training, you see a lot of information out there. It's, week 1 to week 6, progressive overload. You need to be tracking the data. And when you're tracking the data, really is you should be getting 7 to 8 hours. You see a lot of people like 6 to 8 hours sleep. You need to be adding more weight or increasing reps. So you're getting stronger week on week. And then, you're eating your 3 to 4, 5, 6 meals, be the same meals every time, same macros. And you continue that. If you're bulking, you're slowly going up. If you're cutting, you're slowly going down. And so that is typically kind of a linear method that you've got. Now, if we flip it for you, Kathy, and for females, is that you have a cycle. And so there are times where it's interesting talking to a lady today. She's like, what's the point? I'm like, well, in certain phases, you're going to be more cognitively aware and creative. So you need to stimulate more dopamine. You need maybe some more red meat, and that's going to aid cognitive performance, but it'll help manage blood sugars. And then in certain cycles, you have more inflammation. So you need to obviously maybe decrease carbohydrates, or maybe you increase antioxidants and carbohydrates and fats to help your body recover. So it's really going to be, for those that are here, it's going to be really interesting to listen to what Kathy says, because you're going to be, for females and for the guys, that have partners. I know for me, I'm managing. There are times where I'm doing all the cooking for Kate because it's just one. We go, right, what is the one thing we're going to focus on? She just focuses on that, and we look after everything else. And, shout out to Platinum Meals, because they just give us extra meals. We order in there. That's when having meal delivery can help.
Mm-hmm.
So, is Kate crazy? Maybe. So, and, for you, crazy. Yeah. For a lot of us, I'm like, is it me or is it her? And I guess for you, Kathy, since you've gone through this journey, because there are 4 cycles, let's probably break it into delving into the research yourself. Can we start with what are the cycles?
Mm-hmm.
What, as you said, impact on energy, strength, endurance, but then also what are kind of the things to be mindful of? So like foods, or should we be journaling? Like, is journaling important to be aware of my thoughts when in a follicular phase? Like, when and what is most important from your experience?
Yeah. So after I noticed this consistency of my inconsistency, and we started looking at these phases of the menstrual cycle, the first thing I went to was, how does menstruation, how does my cycle affect my strength? Because I was all about lifting heavier, getting stronger, especially after the surgery. So I found this.
Get out with those boys.
Always. So I found this summary of 9 research papers. And 3 out of the 9 research papers showed that women experience increased strength throughout the follicular phase and ovulation. So follicular, the way that I remember it is follicular comes first. So after the bleed, after menstruation, we have the follicular phase that comes first. Then at about days, anywhere between day 12 and 16, depending on the length of your cycle, a woman will ovulate. And this is when estrogen spikes. So we have 3 main hormones: estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So the hormones will be pretty stable and pretty low. They will be lowest just before the bleed. And then we menstruate, the hormones are low and they will rise up, and estrogen in particular will peak hugely at ovulation. This is also when testosterone will peak. And interestingly enough, even in females, testosterone is actually higher in the blood than estrogen. We have more testosterone in the blood. So it will peak at ovulation, and then there's a huge dip post-ovulation. And then that third phase, actually, so we have follicular phase first, ovulation as the second. Third phase will be luteal after the ovulation. And this phase is where progesterone takes over. So we have low estrogen, low testosterone, they're kind of leveling out, and progesterone spikes. And then again, they all dip and they're at their lowest point just before menstruation and as we menstruate or bleed. So I will say either menstruate or bleed, probably easier for me to just say bleed. But those are the 4 phases. And this research has shown that during follicular phase and ovulation, our strength peaks. And then one of these studies showed that our strength decreases mid-luteal. So this is the week before we bleed. And there's a little bit of a phrase out there known as weak, as in weaker, our weakest week. Our weak week is the week before our bleed. So it's not when we're bleeding, it's the week before our bleed. And one out of 9 of these research papers actually showed that. 4 out of 9 research papers showed no difference. That's huge as well. No difference across all 4 phases. And 1 out of 9 showed a decrease during the bleed. So already we're seeing differences here. And this is why I say tracking builds awareness. And although we can make generalizations, although we have research to show what is happening with our hormones, and again, we have trends, each individual woman will experience this differently. How it shows up for you when you're training will be different to what I have experienced, right? Now, once I understood kind of these 4 phases and what was going on with the hormones, I went more into research and I wanted more detail of what are these hormones doing? What are they causing? And this is when I went to Stacey T. Sims. She wrote a book called Raw. She is an exercise physiologist and nutrition scientist. And her experience comes from, I think it's triathlons or ultra marathons, speaking with other women training for marathons or such events. I also looked at Alyssa Vitti. She is a functional nutritionist and women's hormone expert, comes from a background of having PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and she's written the book In the Flow. And again, personal experiences, other women's experiences, listening to these books and listening to testimonials and other women's experiences, it just opens up your mind a lot to what is possible and what is really going on in your body, again, coming from curiosity. So by this point, I had already compiled a lot of data because we were tracking. We're always week to week tracking my sleep, my food, my strength, what's going on. Now going to the research, I was able to connect the dots. One of the things that we really noticed was the caffeine, and this has been an ongoing thing, right? So we really noticed the caffeine sensitivity. And in one of these books, I learned that caffeine and estrogen compete for clearance. So they compete for metabolism. So when we overdo the coffee, which has caffeine, for me specifically, it was coffee. For some women, it might be green tea or just black tea. When we overdo the caffeine, it is competing with estrogen for metabolism in the liver, which means that we are building up estrogen. As we build up estrogen in the body, this actually exacerbates PMS symptoms or premenstrual
Pass
symptoms.
me the shotgun. Yep.
So really interesting. I started to notice this as well prior to reading it. And that's what kind of sparked my curiosity of what happens when I actually try and reduce my caffeine intake and really monitor it and be cautious of it, specifically around that ovulation period, because ovulation is when estrogen peaks. Ovulation is when we want to enable the body to clear the estrogen easier. So if we're drinking a lot of coffee, then estrogen is building up and we're getting those PMS symptoms in the week, to say the week before the period and leading to the period. So bloating, poor digestion, cramping, emotional, just mood swings, all of that can happen when we have this estrogen buildup, which may or may not be caused by the caffeine. It could be caused by other things as well. Tracking builds awareness. So I started to really notice that dip post-ovulation. I started to really notice how coffee impacts that. And when I would go into that week or premenstrual, I started to notice what would help. So going to the chiropractor, really focusing on my nervous system, and then into the bleed, I noticed that having a bit of coffee would motivate me to go to the gym. Again, we're just monitoring things and looking at strategies that will help with my personal experience. All the data in the world doesn't matter if it doesn't match your experience, right? So it's really important to know the 4 phases, know what is going on in general, and then apply it to your experience. How is this showing up with your experience? And leveraging this for training and competition, which I started doing more later in the year. And the concepts that we used and that we usually use is we have a preload week and we have a deload week and we have a max volume week. Getting to know my cycle also meant that we could time that max volume week better. When I'm feeling strong, when I'm feeling my best, and also time that deload week as well. So we have actually, I think over the last year, definitely been kind of stretching out. It used to be 5 weeks that we used to do the training. It used to religiously be like 5 weeks. And then we started stretching it out to like 6 and now even 7 sometimes, depending on how I'm feeling.
Yes.
Kathy has a mind of her own now.
Yes. So typically we used to do 6-week splits. So we'd have preload, 3 standard weeks, then we'd have a max volume week, overreaching, and then a deload week. And then we started to focus on more strength, which became 4-week cycles. But then we've been stretching it out to 8-week cycles, which has me as a coach thinking of different strategies for your programming for when you return from your holiday, which I'm excited to show you. But just on just to clear it up, so you track your energy expenditure, stress levels, your strength, your coffee intake, tracking your sleep quality, any other main metrics that helped you kind of, because I drink a coffee a day, I'm doing 10,000 steps. For anyone that's working with a coach, they're probably doing some tracking, but there's going to be this fluctuation in energy. What stood out to you when tracking? Is there anything outside of that where you were like, yeah, that was really helpful? Because I know we also add, what are your 3 highlights for the week and 3 challenges? So you're starting to think outside of training. Were those helpful, or was there something that you were doing for yourself, journaling or when you're reading, that stood out to you?
So definitely getting to understand. So this is the other thing we saw just patterns in what I was eating, because I tend to just monitor my own diet and food intake, and I'd be like, oh, my fats have increased a bit. I'm craving foods. Once you take away the birth control, once you take away the stimulus that is actually interfering with your body's innate ability, you start to listen to your body more.
Yeah.
Right. You're not suppressing those cues anymore. Now you have cues of appetite. Now you have cues of cravings. What does your body want? And we started to notice that, and later when I was reading, I was like, this makes so much sense. Increasing fats actually helps us to produce more hormones. So during that low hormone period in the bleed and then follicular phase, just before ovulation, we want to increase fats slightly to help the body produce more hormones. This is also when digestion is better. And then after ovulation, we taper down, because now we are in a higher hormone phase. And this is how Stacey T. Sims actually divides it into the low hormone phase and the high hormone phase. So that low hormone phase is the bleed and the follicular phase. So the bleed and the first phase before ovulation. And this is also when our strength is higher, our motivation is higher, we get better recovery, increased heart rate variability, which also means that we are more resilient to stress during this time. So better mood overall, decreased appetite. So now think, decreased appetite makes sense to me, because increasing fats are more energy dense. So we're going to increase the fats a little bit. So we're still getting enough food and enough fuel, and we're supporting that hormone production. Even though our appetite is decreased, we still need to eat. And then post ovulation, we have the high hormone phase, and we have this increased spike during ovulation, and then hormones kind of decrease ongoing. But during this second phase, or the third and the fourth, our strength decreases, known as the weak week. We are in a pro-inflammatory state. We are actually more inflamed and more prone to injury and illness as the immune system is suppressed. So now we're thinking of strategies to actually help the body recover, rest, and prepare for that bleed. And there's going to be different nutrient requirements. So actually in this after ovulation phase, appetite increases, because in preparation for that shed or bleed, we need more energy. Our metabolism actually speeds up. So there's things to consider there. But for me, it was really noticing the consistency in the inconsistency, right? I was really inconsistent with my diet. I was really inconsistent with my training. And then I noticed the consistency in my mood, my food cravings, and I started to just tweak and listen to my intuition. And then I delved into the research, which confirmed that I'm not crazy, that something's going on here, that my body is speaking to me, my hormones are speaking to me. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is, you are not your body. You are the consciousness that is observing your body. So we are listening to the body. How can I listen to my body better? How can I create more space and time, more journaling practices to get to know what's going on? Tracking builds awareness. We notice the trends, we notice the patterns. Then we can build systems that will help us be our best self. And the other thing I want to highlight is that you don't always need to track everything. In the beginning, yeah, probably increasing awareness. After a certain point, it just becomes an innate ability. You're just listening to yourself. It just becomes a way of life. This is the way we do things. It's just who you are. You understand why better. You understand yourself better. It all comes back to know thyself. For me, definitely it was the mood and the coffee, and noticing what was going on around ovulation and the bleed, because I didn't get any tests done, but I noticed a significant difference once I did reduce the caffeine, and I did do a cleanse by myself and I still support my liver nowadays during ovulation to process the estrogen. I really noticed a difference in my mood. Some women might know about PMDD, premenstrual depressive disorder, or premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is described as PMS on steroids. It is a very severe case of PMS, which is why it has a special term for it. And there is a separate diagnostic criteria for it. A lot of the symptoms that I was experiencing around ovulation and post-ovulation when my coffee intake was high were very similar to PMDD. Now, the biggest difference is there is increased suicidal tendencies and thoughts in women with PMDD.
The people around them or the person themselves?
Or the person themselves. Yeah. So, and this then impacting people around them, right? So they
want to kill them. Yeah.
Huge. And I want to highlight that a lot of those symptoms, although in the diagnostic criteria for PMDD, they actually cleared up once I started metabolizing estrogen properly. Once I actually gave my body what it needed or took away what it didn't need. So that started to balance the hormones better. The body was metabolizing hormones better. There was no buildup. And also, there's this really big, I believe it's a myth now. Again, this research and readings just opens up your mind more. We are so used to PMSing, premenstrual syndrome, PMSing, and the mood swings and being grumpy or what. I truly believe PMS is a myth. It is likely a buildup of estrogen and a hormonal imbalance in some way. When the body is working optimally, metabolizing hormones optimally, producing hormones optimally, the mood swings don't happen as much. You are more in tune with yourself, and it's more of a flow than a fight. Because I feel like PMS in society, it's very negatively framed, and we have a chance to reframe this. Instead of I'm PMSing, I'm just prioritizing myself. Same letters, PMS, prioritizing myself. It is a time when women will go more inward, will slow down in preparation for the bleed. And it doesn't have to be a fight. It doesn't have to be suppressed. It doesn't have to be this huge mood swing thing, which might be happening. And this, again, is giving you cues and insights into something else is going on in my life that is agitating my nervous system, that is impacting my reproductive system, which comes back to the psychological aspects of having a menstrual cycle and the emotional kind of stuff that's going on.
But on that, you, prior to this, when you were going through PMS and PMDD, you weren't detoxing, and you were getting about 4 to 5 hours of sleep as an average, and now you'll get anywhere from 7 to up to 10 at the moment. So you've really worked on the sleep. So just if we can just peel it back to go into, we're going to play devil's advocate, right? Is that, for someone, it's like they've got kids, they're working in the corporate world. It's like, oh, come on, Kathy, the male-dominated industry. So it's like, oh, you didn't sleep right last night. Suck it up, have a coffee. You got to work 9 to 5. How, I'm sitting here going, I'm a, female Carla here. Hello. My boss says, you got to suck it up. I'm like, oh, how do I manage this? Because I'm feeling stuck. Like I've got an implant on in. I think I should take it out, and I'm just going through that whirlwind at the moment. How does someone start to navigate through this? Is it maybe, hey, maybe cut coffee out, focus on teas, and then see how you go, and notice if there are huge cravings, maybe implement one coffee, but it's day by day, and notice over that cycle? Like, what would your strategy be if you were to do it all again, but you couldn't do the research, you could only go by feel? How would you start?
Support is so nice.
You're an all or nothing person. So how could we strategize?
Am I, Carl?
Yeah. How can we strategize this in a world where it's dominated, where everyone's like, nah, you're crazy. You're the problem. So I'm going to need you to contain it. But at the same time,
Yeah, firstly, it's believing your own experience. So having enough self-confidence and believing that you are having an experience and this is new to you. This is something I haven't experienced before. This is new, and it's seeking support. Support is huge. Even the support that I have with you, even though we didn't focus on the menstrual cycle specifically for some time, having someone support me through building habits of healthy sleep and exercise and really just being compassionate towards myself, that meant a lot. And then we added the extra layer of what's happening with the menstrual cycle, what's happening with the hormones, what's happening with the mood. Support is huge. Having the right support through this is, again, never underestimate the power of a good sounding board. As you share your experiences, as you get validated, as you talk and make sense of what is happening, because that will help you get to know yourself better and get to know what your next step is towards what do you need to do to feel your best. And for you, it will be individually to you. Like I said, all the data in the world doesn't matter if it doesn't match your experience. At the end of the day, you are n equals 1 in your life. You are the one subject in your life, and you will fall somewhere in those averages, in those generalizations, right? And this is a habit. Building confidence, building motivation to work with this, it's a habit. It's something that the more you do it, the better you get at it. Understanding it will take time. And that's a big thing that I've really learned over the last 2 years, probably, that trial and error and correction, it takes time. Implementing it into your life takes time. Seeing those results, seeing those hormones balance out, it does take time. It doesn't have to take a year. You can see results in as little as 2 to 3 months with the right support and guidance, right? And now, you said without having done the research, but after doing the research, I noticed the strategies. Again, knowing the 4 phases is huge. Knowing the 4 phases and knowing your associated mood and behaviors and habits and nutrient requirements that are real. Some of them are really obvious. Like when you're bleeding, you're going to need more iron. Might not be obvious to someone who doesn't know anything about nutrition, right? So through blood, we're losing iron.
Is that dependent on flow?
It will depend on flow as well. Absolutely. Some women will bleed 5 days. Some women will bleed 2-3 days. But again, generally speaking, we all need more iron because we're losing iron through blood.
And does that mean like eat more meat or more veggie? Like what type of?
It could, but then again, it depends on the person, right? If, again, there are vegetarian sources of
meat.
But meat's going to be the easiest to absorb. And then again, if someone has a history of low iron, they may need to supplement or what's going on. So again, it depends on the person, what kind of strategy they use. The other thing is knowing, for example, caffeine interferes with iron absorption. Zinc interferes with iron absorption. Dairy, calcium interferes with iron absorption. So it's being more mindful of when we are eating what. So it's nutrient timing as well. Again, so I come from a background of dietetics, having known this information and being very cautious about this, having the right guidance.
Have coffee with chicken, not with steak.
Again, highlighting, I went into this whole experience with already a lot of background knowledge. So it was just puzzle piecing the things that I knew already.
Though, just on a flow, so would you say, as an example, if we're increasing iron, so if I'm someone who eats meat, I'm having menstruation, so I start my bleed today, I should start, and let's say I eat chicken and fish, because I feel better with it, but maybe when I hit my bleeding phase, maybe have 1 serve of red meat, or for vegans, find the vegetables that are iron rich until the bleed stops and then go back to kind of what I was doing.
So this is the thing, your body will tell you what it needs. And very often it will be the week before your bleed that you will start to crave food.
Okay.
And women do talk about PMSing and craving chocolate. Now, the major nutrient that we're getting from cacao is actually magnesium. And we know during that week or the week before our bleed, our nutrient requirements increase about 250 to 350 calories more we are expending. We need more magnesium. We need more iron in preparation for that bleed. We need more food overall. So those food cravings that you're having, track them, note them down. What are you craving will reveal what nutrients you need to increase during this time. Specifically with athletes, iron is huge, especially in women, because just even if you're not bleeding, you're using your iron stores more as an athlete. You're running through all your stores much faster than the average person if you are training consistently and hard. And pushing for those results. Again, it's coming in with curiosity and a level of awareness, noticing these things.
So in the 4 phases, from menstruation to follicular to ovulation to luteal phase, really, if I'm noticing something in the menstruation phase, that's what's probably necessary for my follicular phase, and my follicular phase to my ovulation. Is that kind of the flow? Like, whatever I'm experiencing now is in preparation for my next.
Probably backwards, I would say. So if you're experiencing something during your bleed, probably it's more about being prepared for the bleed. So if you're having more food cravings, if you're isolating yourself during your bleed, probably because during that PMS, prioritizing myself or week, you probably haven't done enough of that during that time. So now you're overcompensating. So you're always trying to catch up, kind of a thing, right? You picking up what I'm putting down. It's more about being prepared for what's coming, and allowing that and making space for that. Space, time, energy, just boundaries as well, understanding yourself better. One of the things that helps, and that's kind of trendy at the moment, actually, I don't know if you've heard about cycle syncing. So there is this
and I do this all the time.
There is this concept of adjusting your training towards those 4 phases, depending, like I said before, when strength is increased, when strength is decreased, and really increasing the impact versus decreasing the load and stuff like that. And I think this, again, take it with a grain of salt. It's a strategy. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, also great. We're noticing something. And it might only be temporary. So, for example, for me, I really noticed that this helped last year when I was balancing my hormones. Now, I don't need to do it. It's like I feel much more leveled out overall because my hormones are working more optimally than last year.
Sorry, for the purpose of the recording in this episode, could you repeat that again?
Which part?
The whole you don't notice it as much anymore, yet somehow with your training you still make changes.
So again, trial and error and correction with the end goal in mind. What are we trying to achieve with this cycle syncing? Is this going to be your ongoing, now you're adapting this as your lifestyle, or is this temporarily whilst you want to balance out your hormones? Because that can be a great strategy if your hormones are not balanced, if you're coming off birth control, if your period has been missing for a while, if your nervous system is overstimulated, if emotionally you're holding on to a lot and you've been through a toxic relationship, or you're still learning how to navigate relationships around you and set those boundaries, cycle syncing can actually help us ease all of this, right? And help support the reproductive system and support the hormone production.
Yeah.
So now we're coming back to sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous system, because the reproductive system and menstruation is governed by the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest, our tend and befriend, which is our calming nervous system, versus everything that's interfering with that is our sympathetic fight or flight or freeze response, which gets overstimulated. Caffeine increases it, also hot foods, chili, those toxic relationships, or when we feel that we are threatened by anything, our identity is threatened, we're in fear, those negative emotions that we're experiencing, that we're holding on to, that we're suppressing, all of that is sympathetic nervous system. And when we are in overdrive, we're not using our parasympathetic. And this is where those hormonal issues become prominent, and all those symptoms as well of PMS. So cycle syncing, it's a strategy, can be a good strategy. I reckon specifically for women who are experiencing heightened premenstrual symptoms or PMDD, again, depending on diagnosis. Another strategy is seed cycling. Seed cycling actually supports the production of hormones. So seed cycling occurs in 14 days, like it's, again, 14 plus 14, 28. It takes kind of the average. The first 14 days, so that is the follicular phase. Remember, this is the phase where we are supporting hormone production. So we want more omega-3s, more fatty acids. So this is flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds are actually going to help us with our production of those hormones. Versus the second lot of 14 days, we want to focus on sesame and sunflower, which are omega-6s, which increase progesterone, which is that other hormone that spikes, so we're supporting progesterone production, as well as clearing estrogen. So this is seed cycling, focusing on specific seeds to include into the diet. Another strategy that can help us with balancing our hormones.
Yep.
The other thing I would say is it's just really important to eat. Fuel for what you're doing.
Sorry, let me just pick up my eyeballs.
So
Eating
really
helps?
Yeah, fueling for what you are doing is so important. So especially, I love what Stacey says in her book, Raw. Women are not small men. Our physiology is different.
Small men.
Women are not small men. Our hormones are different. Our physiology is different. How we're processing things, even just the fact that we're processing all this estrogen during ovulation in the liver, it's putting more strain on the liver. So how do we support our liver through this? How do we support metabolism through this? With the food that we eat and the movement that we do, as well as the other habits, like we touched on sleep a little bit as well. Important to eat before and eat after to fuel for the exercise that you're doing. Specifically, women do worse on fasted exercise, and this is something that made a huge difference for me last year as I started implementing it as well. Just getting up and having a pre-workout meal of cornflakes with a banana and low-fat milk has made all the difference in order for me to be able to do the exercises, push the weight, and I'm noticing those body recompositioning happening, right? Noticing the results that I want. And that's the priority, is the body recompositioning when it comes to athletic performance in particular and optimizing health. More muscle, more strength equals more muscle equals more strength, better performance overall. So that's body recompositioning. And we're kind of trying to move away from the BMI concept, because we know that it has its faults. Like, I'm considered overweight at the moment. Did you know that? It's pretty cool.
Yep.
And again, it's like I'm holding a weight steady, but I'm noticing I'm much leaner, and it's the tracking and the noticing. What am I noticing? I am noticing my veins popping when I'm doing bicep curls now, which never used to happen before. That happens with getting leaner.
That's also because you were only doing 8s and 10s, not 17s.
Yeah, we're getting to the 20s. We're getting there. Again, more strength because I'm fueling better. And the hormones are optimized for me as a woman as we get in balance, as we get in flow. And it took some time, especially after taking out the Implanon, after having the surgery that I had. It has taken us almost a year to get to this point, through trial and error and correction, and really noticing how I'm limiting myself, noticing the story that I'm telling myself. And there's been things in between. And that's the other thing why guidance is so important, because life has happened and there's been major emotions have come up. And it's supporting myself through processing those emotions rather than suppressing them, because the womb is actually called the low heart of a woman. A woman will suppress emotions in the womb until her high heart, or our usual heart in the chest, is ready to process them. So a woman is actually suppressing fear, guilt, shame, anger, sadness, all of these emotions in the womb, which is going to manifest as menstrual challenges and issues with the reproductive system in general.
Mm.
And that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah. Another episode. So just on that, because that's a bit of a conception there that a lot of people, as I said, they work in the 9 to 5 and being told I'm crazy and I need to bottle that down and manage that. I think would be a good time to pivot into probably a few misconceptions. So rapid fire that's people may be thinking, or that's out there. So how do you feel about that? Can we go dive into that? Top 20?
Top 20.
20. Training. So we're just going to kind of rapid fire this a little bit with kind of maybe some strategies or thoughts. So number one is training is harmful during menstruation. Shouldn't do it.
That's not true. That's just not true. So I would say, again, it's monitoring your mood, what's happening there. So personally, I'm like, oh, coffee's going to help me motivate a little bit. But what am I seeking here? It's the dopamine hit. You can get this with alpha GPC. You can get a release of dopamine, which will help you get concentrated again. Or cold showers and ice baths as well. That will help, again, release a whole lot of dopamine for you to get motivated, to get going. It's not harmful to train. And if anything, it's going to be helpful.
During menstruation, performance always declines.
So I literally said those research papers, 4 out of 9 of those research papers showed absolutely no change. And also it's your personal experience of what's happening. And each cycle is going to be different as well. And this is it also depends on where you are in your life and how peaceful your life is, or how turbulent, what challenges you're going through, right? So each cycle is going to be different. This is where we want to achieve the flow and understanding.
Is lifting heavy weights unsafe during menstruation?
I would say no. Or menstruation. So now taking into consideration, you are more prone to injury after ovulation, right? So here's the thing. During ovulation, testosterone peaks. You are more likely to go in and do a few ego lifts. So be cautious of ego lifting, which is going to put you more at risk of injury. And then after ovulation, because your immune system is suppressed and you are in a pro-inflammatory state, you are more susceptible to injury and illness. So it's just being aware of it, but I wouldn't say it's not safe. It's more about the fueling and the rest and the recovery. So if you are supporting your body with proper fueling, with proper rest and recovery, with proper sleep, magnesium increased requirements as well during this phase, you're fine to lift heavy.
All women have premenstrual syndrome, PMS, that affects their training?
This is like the biggest myth that it's a total myth. PMS, some discomfort, maybe, probably, but exacerbated symptoms of bloating and poor digestion and mood swings are an indication of hormonal imbalances and metabolism not working properly. Something else is going on, possibly even suppressing emotions. There are blockages somewhere. We're not optimally metabolizing. So PMS is a myth when it comes to those PMS symptoms that we all know about. And I really encourage you to reframe this to prioritizing myself.
Okay. Intense exercise can stop your period?
Intense exercise can stop your period. This is interesting. I haven't done research into it. It would make sense if you are in overdrive So if you are in that sympathetic nervous system and if you are pushing yourself a lot, again, during that second kind of half, you are more prone to illness and injury. And if you're just constantly pushing it, you're probably going to delay it. And personally, for me, with my cycle, it has been a bit of a waiting game in those kind of 28 to 32 days until it starts to regulate a bit better and hits the 29 days now regularly. But it has been like, oh, pull back, prioritizing myself, chiropractic, just nourishing myself, nurturing myself, going for that ocean swim to drop into that parasympathetic nervous system, which governs the menstrual cycle and the reproductive system, to allow for that bleed. So if we are constantly stressed, if we are over exercising, overextending ourselves, again, if we're not fueling and recovering properly, we will suppress our menstruation.
Is menstruation a good excuse to skip my workouts?
No, I don't believe so. And again, listen to your body. There have been times where I delayed it. I'd be like, you know what, this day, again, I'm cramping heaps, I'm bleeding heaps. I don't want to go to the gym. I'm going to take this day off that I usually train, but the day that I usually take off, I'm going to go and train. So listening to your body and what you need, giving yourself what you need, being very compassionate towards yourself, and it's having those boundaries with yourself, those expectations from yourself. This is very common in high performance, that we will have standards that we want to live up to, and I will make a rule for myself. I can take so for me, it's day 2 that it's the heaviest bleed, and I'm like, I have a rule. I can take day 2 off if I want to, given that the usual day that I take off, I go to the gym. So I'm still hitting the weekly requirements of my program.
Yeah.
So it's coming up with those little things for yourself. And that only happens as you know yourself better.
Does exercise increase menstrual flow?
I don't think it does. I haven't looked into the research. I would say that menstrual flow is very individual and personal. I think there would be a genetic factor to it as well, possibly. Nutrition, possibly as well, and stress in general. That's interesting.
Good one.
I think exercising will actually, again, just thinking about menstruation and bleeding, it will help you shed faster so that your period's actually less days. But the flow itself and the heaviness will depend on other things as well.
Can you build muscle during your period?
You can build muscle at any time, given that you are fueling and pushing the weights and the strength, right? And getting enough recovery.
Menstrual cycle has no impact on my hydration.
Hydration and menstrual cycle. I haven't looked into that. Again, thinking about just overall, after ovulation, luteal phase is when energy requirements, nutrient requirements increase in general. So according to this, I would also say that possibly hydration increases during this time as well, requirements, just to allow for all of that nutrition again to be absorbed, because we have water soluble and fat soluble vitamins, and we know that water is transferring all of this around the body.
As she has some tea to hydrate. Only aerobic exercise is beneficial during menstruation?
Myth.
The menstrual cycle does not affect mental focus or mood.
It will, even if you just think about that second phase being a pro-inflammatory, where we are more inflamed. More inflammation means that we're not going to be concentrating as well. So Alyssa Vitti in The Flow beautifully lays out the different phases and how it actually impacts our state mentally as well as in work and what we might notice. Again, highlighting that this is for women who are not on birth control, and as we get off birth control, that it takes time for the cycle to regulate itself and we start to feel into this innate ability of a woman's body more and more as we track and get to know ourselves. So your concentration definitely will be impacted, and it will have some sort of a flow depending on the menstrual cycle as well.
Yeah. Should you all, of course, this isn't a myth. You should always follow the same routine.
Oh, flexibility. And that's what flow is all about. And a lot of compassion, flexibility. And once you actually get into those phases, again, you'll start to notice, like I said, the consistency in my inconsistency. It's noticing, oh, during this phase, I'm more prone to doing this. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to. You always have a choice. It's noticing it and then making a decision. And the more you notice it, the more you know it, the easier it will be for you. Like this process becomes faster and faster. It's not like you're standing there and making a decision for hours. It's you notice it and you have a choice. And how can I create more choice in my life? What are my options here? Right.
So we're going to pivot into the next state to be a little more around the performance and cognitive for work. So for people in the corporate world. Myth, all women experiencing mood swings that affect work interactions.
Not all women experience PMS. Not all women experience PMDD. Like, this is already showing us the cycle is so different and individual, and it's going to depend on a lot of different things.
Yep. Menstrual symptoms are always visible.
No, they're not. Menstrual symptoms are always visible. No, I don't think that males really know. They don't really know when women are bleeding. And we do a good job of just getting on with it, I think.
Oh. Discussing menstrual related needs at work is unprofessional. Oh, controversial.
This is very controversial, right? And are we going to start having those talks? I think this is an area that has room for improvement. I think that if the workplace is female dominant, that it will be much more open to discussing this. This is an interesting topic. Like, how do we, again, stigma, are we going to start talking about it? Are we going to start allowing it? Yeah.
Yeah, but then it's a very open forum, right? Because then, there are people that manage it really well, and then there are people that just don't manage it and abuse it.
Well, here's the thing, right? If you're not managing your menstrual cycle very well, again, there's a line between abusing it and taking days off because you don't want to, and this is, again, personal integrity, right? So this comes back to your personal standards and integrity of what you decide to do. But if we were to talk about this a little bit more, it can also potentially improve productivity in the workplace, because those women who are struggling with this can seek support and can be referred on to seek support, can be given the support that they need, right?
This is great. The next thing that people look up. Menstrual pain is just an excuse for less productivity.
Menstrual pain is probably an indication of some hormonal imbalances, underlying causes. What are the root causes of this? Maybe some emotional suppression as well. It is a little orange flag. I'm not going to say red flag. I'm going to orange flag it, as I want to stay curious, know more about this. Where is it coming from, and who can I ask for help?
Next myth. Women should just push through menstrual discomfort at work.
So that comes back to we're suppressing our actual needs.
Man, then these all line up nicely. All women are equally affected by their menstrual cycle at work. Not at home, at work.
No, there's, again, individualized. And this, I think I made a great point with, if we were to talk about this a little bit more, those women who are really struggling would get the support that they need and would actually learn to manage it. And again, societal norms and what we have normalized PMS symptoms when actually they are an orange or red flag for we need to investigate this a little bit more and help yourself and heal yourself. And this is how later down the track, we nowadays also have increased rates of infertility and fertility issues coming back to we're suppressing these emotions in our womb, we're suppressing our femininity, we're suppressing a lot.
Only women in certain age, this is a good one, only women in certain age groups are affected by menstrual cycle issues.
No, so definitely once you start menstruating, so up until, when you're a child going into those years, you don't worry about this. You don't have those hormones going on. They're going on differently. Once you start menstruating, all throughout, even post-menopause, there is still the female 28-day cycle. Even though you're not bleeding, your body is still going through that innate ability and that flow. You can still, and Alyssa Vitti just describes this beautifully in her book, In the Flow, you can still make this a lifestyle to allow that flow and to allow that feminine energy to continue, even if you're not bleeding.
Last one, providing menstrual health support at work is unnecessary.
Coming back to just, if we were to start talking about this a little bit more, and each workplace is going to be different depending on how many females we have and who's going to be in charge of addressing this and how we're going to seek that support and who we're going to seek it from. But this is a real opportunity for workplaces to actually look into this. How can we support our women a bit more through this? Because it is unique to women. And like I said, women are not small men. This is something unique to women. And it's an area that we got to stop suppressing. We actually got to shed a bit of light on this. How can we support women in the workplace through this? How can we help them be their best self? So what if you have one day workshop to actually help them understand this stuff?
And those are some of the myths.
Yeah, and then they will actually reach out to the support that they need and investigate further if they do. Or also mothers will know how to support their daughters through this. Education at all levels.
Any final words or thoughts on this matter of, navigating the menstrual cycle to optimize health and athletic performance, Kathy?
Self-compassion. Self-compassion comes up, and seeking support. Self-compassion and seeking support is, I think, with those two things, you're on the right track.
Nice. And probably just on this, I would say, I'm aware that you run a program called the Detox by Design. So for someone who's probably having challenges, and I know Kate's gone through this as well, through the lives of working with you in supplementation. If someone is short on time, wants to look after themselves, but is stuck in that 9 to 5 and wanting a bit of support, but isn't able to dive fully into this, where can they find out more about that?
Yeah, so the Detox by Design is a 5-day wellness kind of a challenge. It's only an hour to an hour and a half a day where we cover a lot of these concepts as well. And the round 2 will be happening end of July, beginning of August. So they can jump on board, go to my Instagram page. The link tree is there that leads to the registration for that one. And more specifically, now that you've reminded me, is I'm actually coming out with a 3-day, more in-depth, up to 2 hours. It'll be an hour and a half, probably 2 hours, specifically for women, Flow to Wellness, the title of our podcast, which is going to delve into this stuff that we discussed today and really help women create that time and space for them to reflect on what they're going through so that they can start implementing these strategies, which ones are going to help them move more towards that flow.
Awesome. That is Kathy O, the Flow into Wellness. to help us navigate the menstrual cycle to optimize health and well-being from personal experiences, our own research, and also breaking down some myths, misconceptions from individuals and even in the workplace. Till next time, adios, amigos. Doo-doo-doo.